Welcome to Friesen Art. Today we are looking at digital painting, the essentials. So looking at what you need to know in terms of painting. Today I'm using Adobe Fresco, free app, works great on Apple devices and some Windows as well, so you can check out the specifications. Today I'm going to choose a square canvas and it will take me right there. Perfect, so I've got my working space, my digital page. I've got my layers over here, which I'll be using. And then we've got all the tools down here. So we've got a bunch of tools. We're only going to use the paintbrush, the bitmap one, the pixel brush. We might use the eraser. And we'll also be using the eyedropper to grab some color. Before we do that, I want to grab a photo reference. So there's my page. I'm zooming in and out with my hand. And then I'm going to go to photos and I'm going to grab this apple picture. Perfect. So here's my reference photo. I suggest you start with something that's got one color with a basic shape, just to get these painting basics down. Because when we're talking about painting, it's not exactly like drawing. Painting is, we're using blobs or blocks of color to build up a surface rather than putting a bunch of lines down. So we're not going to like sketch it out and put lines. We are going to block it in. We're going to find the shape, which I think a lot of people find easier. So I'm going to go to my brush. I'm going to go to painting and I'm going to grab canvas brush flat. I really like this one. It looks like you're painting on canvas. It's got some great texture to it. And I think it looks pretty cool. Looks traditional. So once I've got my paintbrush, I can resize it here by just scrolling up and down. If you're using a finger, that works too. All this stuff is the same. If you're just using your hands, that works great. Now, to begin with, what I want to do is I don't want to paint on the photo or the reference. I want to add a new layer. You can see one goes on top, and I want this layer on top. So this is separate. I'll be able to separate them out afterwards. Finally, before I start, I want to grab a medium color. And by medium color, I mean I don't want the highlights that are really bright, and I don't want the lowlights or the shadows that are really dark. I want something in the middle. So it's going to be this nice red color from the apple. Now, as I'm painting, I want to make sure I have the right size brush. This brush size seems pretty good. I can go back over here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. There we go. So as I said, I'm not going to put a bunch of lines down. For painting, I'm going to look at the shape and I'm just going to build it up slowly. So there's a lot less pressure. I don't have to make a perfect line. I'm going to build this up with a bunch of brush strokes, and I can find the shape by just going over it and seeing, and I see it's like bigger up top and it tapers down towards the bottom. So I'm going to try and get that general shape. If it's not perfect, don't worry about it. This is a lot of people's first time digital painting, and yeah, don't be too hard on yourself. So there we go. That looks pretty good. We've got some good shape. I'm going to bump those little pieces out on the bottom. And sometimes with digital painting, it's really nice that you can switch your brush in the middle. So you can just switch your brush out without losing too much time. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. You can see it's not perfect, but it's looking good. And we're going to build it up some more. So now that I've got this base medium color, I'm going to make a new layer, and next I'm going to tackle the shadows. So I'm going to do the same process as before. I'll grab my eyedropper, I'll bring it over to the apple. I grabbed a medium one. Now I want some shadow. So I'm going to stop right here, and you can see it's giving me this nice dark red color. I'm going to grab my brush again, and I'll see if this is big enough. Yeah, this seems good. So now I'm just looking at my reference, seeing anywhere where there's dark spots, like up here, back this way, over here, coming around, and on the bottom. I might make the brush just a little bit bigger. And so I'm just going to block it in once again. I'm going to put some blobs of paint here and across the back where the stem goes into that center area when we're looking up top. And then I'm seeing some over here as well. And our style today, at least if you're following along with what I'm doing, is going to be more impressionistic. It's going to be more about light and getting the right colors rather than being photographic. This is our, a lot of us are beginning with this. And so we don't need to spend hours on this. This is just to get our feet wet, just to understand that how painting is different than drawing and some other stuff, other media. There we go. So you can see I'm going a little bit light on some of those things. I'm going to put a little bit of dark just across here as well, just to give it some shape. There we go. So it looks nice and sketchy, and that's what we're going for on this one. Okay, I'm going to bring this just in a little bit more, and that's looking good. So now that I've got the shadows placed in there, I'm going to make a new layer, and you might have guessed it already. I'm going to do some highlights. Same process. I'm going to grab the eyedropper. I'm going to find some light pinkish color that's going to sit right on top. That looks great. I've got my new layer, and so now I've got a little bit of highlight right here. Gets big on the left and then gets a little smaller as we go to the right. I'm seeing some highlights down here. I'm going to make my brush small and shape this a little bit. Have it tapering out, getting smaller as it goes. And I'll bring this one over here too. Nice. And there's a little bit on the side here. It gets very light, even though it's right next to the darkness, you can see. So I'm going to put a little bit there. It's about observation, right? Not just looking at the apple, but we're seeing what's there. Looking and seeing are a little bit different when we're talking about art. And then across the top, the highlights kind of play across the crest of where dips into where the stem is. So I'm going to go across, and I'm actually going over some of my shadow, which is great. And we have some that's kind of spider out. There's little legs that come across here. There we go. So you can see it's loose, right? It's loose, but we're getting used to the colors. We're getting used to the layers. We're not worrying too much about how perfect it is. This is just a bit of a warm-up. So there we go. We've got that. And then finally, I think there's some really, really light spots where it's pretty much white. If we're looking at the reference, this is really white. So I'm going to go one more. I'm going to keep this just on the same layer. And right now I'm in this pink zone. I'm going to move it really close to white, not perfect white. And then I can put it right where it gets the lightest. So the more layers, the more colors we put down, the more realistic it gets. So if you do want to take this further, you can just keep on finding those different shades in here, and you can be adding them on there. But if you're just starting out, maybe you want to leave it here. It just depends on how far you want to take it. So there we go. I think that looks pretty good for the apple right now. Finally, I think I want to add the stem because it looks a little weird without the stem. I think the stem is going to let people know what's going on with this thing. So for the stem, I'm going to pick my own color. I'm just going to make it pretty dark. I'm going to keep it in that red zone, but almost black. I'm going to keep this brush, but I'm going to make it quite small so that I can do, this is the closest thing to a line we're going to have because it is such a skinny little thing. And it's got a bit of a nubbin up top. There we go. So we've got that there. So now when we look at it, especially when we zoom out, we're seeing that it's matching a lot of the things. When we look at it really close, it looks brushy and brush strokes, like you can see all the brush strokes, but that's perfectly fine. This is a very good start for digital painting. So you can go off and do yours, and good luck.